I should have kept walking that night, because the river was not asking for help. It was keeping a secret. My name is Hannah Reed, and until 2:13 a.m. on a Thursday morning, the most dangerous thing in my life was exhaustion. 14 hours in the emergency room had left my feet numb, my shoulders stiff, and my mind floating somewhere between coffee and prayer. The smell of antiseptic still clung to my hands no matter how many times I washed them. My navy scrubs were wrinkled under my old gray coat, and my hair had slipped loose from its clip in damp brown strands that stuck to my neck. It had been raining since dinner, the kind of cold, stubborn rain that made every streetlight look blurred and lonely. Most people in the city were asleep or pretending to be. I was walking home because my car had refused to start again, because the bus stopped running near my apartment after midnight, and because nurses learn early that nobody is coming to save you from a bad day. You just keep moving. One step, then another. Riverside Bridge was the fastest way back to my building, even though I hated crossing it at night. It stretched over the black water like a line drawn between two versions of the city. On one side were hospitals, diners, parking lots, and tired people counting tips or hours. On the other were glass towers with lights still burning on the top floors, where men in expensive suits made decisions that never seemed to touch the ground. I kept my keys threaded between my fingers, not because I was brave, but because every woman in America has been taught to turn fear into a routine. The wind pushed rain under my collar. A truck hissed past behind me, spraying dirty water along the curb. Somewhere far away, a siren rose and faded, swallowed by the storm. I remember thinking I had exactly half a carton of eggs in my fridge, one overdue electric bill on my kitchen counter, and 5 hours before I had to be back at work. That was my life. Small problems. Familiar problems. Problems with numbers and dates and late fees. Then the river made a sound. Not a splash. Not like a branch falling or trash hitting the water. It was heavier than that. Wrong. Final. My steps. Stopped before my mind understood why. I turned toward the railing, rain sliding down my face, my breath catching in my throat. Below me, the river moved in dark folds, rough from the storm and silver where the bridge lights touched it. For a second, I saw nothing. Just water. Just night. Then something pale moved near the rocks below, appearing and disappearing with the current. My heart hit once hard. I leaned over the rail, squinting through the rain, and that was when I saw a hand. At first, my brain refused to name what I was seeing. A hand did not belong there, rising from the river like something the night had forgotten to hide. It vanished under the dark water, then appeared again, fingers scraping weakly against the slick stones below the bridge. My body moved before my fear could stop it. I ran along the railing until I found the service stairs, the narrow concrete steps that maintenance crews used during daylight. At night, they looked like a bad decision carved into the side of the bridge. Rain turned them shiny. My shoes slipped twice on the way down, and the second time my knee hit the edge hard enough to send a bright flash of pain up my leg. I kept going. The river was louder underneath the bridge. Meaner. It slapped against the rocks and pulled back with a sound like breathing through clenched teeth. The closer I got, the colder the air became, carrying the smell of mud, gasoline, and storm drains. I saw him fully then. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, caught between two low rocks near the bank, one arm hooked at an awkward angle over the stone as if that was the only thing keeping the river from taking him. His white dress shirt clung to him, torn at one sleeve and stained dark in places the rain kept washing thin. His black pants looked expensive. His shoes looked more expensive than my rent. Even half-conscious, even soaked and helpless, he did not look like someone who belonged in the mud under a bridge. He looked like someone who belonged behind locked doors, behind tinted windows, behind men who spoke quietly and obeyed quickly. I should have called emergency services right then. That was what any sane person would have done. That was what I had been trained to do. Scene safety first. Call for backup. Do not become the second patient. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, rain blurring the screen, but before I could dial, the man moved. His head lifted barely an inch. His eyes opened. Gray. Not soft gray. Not storm gray. Steel gray. Sharp even through pain and water and whatever had happened to him before the river found him. His gaze locked on mine with such force that my thumb froze above the screen. He tried to speak. Only the rain answered. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering so hard it hurt. There was something in his right hand, clutched tight against his chest. A silver ring, heavy and old-looking, marked with a black crest I did not recognize. He saw me looking at it. His fingers closed tighter. Then his mouth moved again, and this time I heard him over the river. No police. 2 words. Low, rough, desperate, but still somehow commanding. I stared at him, cold rain running into my eyes. Every instinct I had told me that a man who said that while half drowned in a river was trouble. Maybe the kind of trouble that ruined lives. Maybe the kind that ended them quietly. But then the current surged, his grip slipped, and the river pulled him down to his shoulders. Whatever he was, whoever he was still a person in front of me, and I was still the kind of woman who could not watch someone disappear. I dropped my phone into my coat pocket, grabbed the old rescue rope looped beside the warning sign, and climbed down onto the rocks before I could change my mind. The rope was rough in my hands, stiff from weather and neglect, but it was the only thing between that man and the river. I tied one end around the metal post beneath the warning sign, pulling the knot twice because my fingers were slick and shaking. The other end went around my waist. It was a terrible plan. It was not even a plan. It was panic wearing the costume of courage. The rocks shifted under my shoes as I climbed lower, rain striking the back of my neck, water spraying cold across my face. "Stay with me," I shouted, though I did not know if he could hear me. His eyes found mine again for half a second. That was all. Then his head dipped forward, and the current dragged at him like it had been waiting for permission. I reached for his wrist. Missed. My hand slapped wet stone, pain sparking through my palm. I tried again, stretching so far my shoulder screamed. This time my fingers closed around his sleeve. The fabric tore. For one horrible breath, I thought I had lost him. Then his hand caught mine. His grip was weak, but it was there. Human. Warm beneath the cold river. I braced one foot against a rock and pulled. He was heavier than he looked. All soaked clothes and dead weight and stubborn survival. The river fought me for every inch. It tugged at his legs. It tugged at my balance. The rope snapped tight around my waist, stealing the air from my lungs. I tasted rain and fear and something metallic from biting the inside of my cheek. "Help me," I whispered, not to him, not to God exactly, maybe to the part of myself that had not given up yet. I pulled again. He slid over the rocks with a low sound caught in his throat, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to remind me he was still here. I hooked both arms under his shoulders and dragged him toward the narrow strip of mud beneath the bridge, 1 inch at a time, until the river finally released him. We collapsed together on the bank. For a moment, I could not move. My lungs burned. My knee throbbed. My coat was soaked through, heavy as a blanket made of ice. Then training took over. I rolled him carefully to his side, checked his breathing, pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. His pulse was there. Slow, uneven, but there. "Good," I breathed. "Good. Stay alive for me." His eyelids fluttered. Up close, he looked younger than the power in his eyes had made him seem. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair plastered to his forehead. Sharp cheekbones. A face too controlled for a man pulled from a river. His hand moved toward his chest again, searching for the ring. I placed it in his palm, and his fingers closed around it like it was the last piece of himself he trusted. His eyes opened. "If they ask," he said, voice barely more than air, "you never saw me." I should have been afraid of that sentence. I was. But fear did not stop my hands from checking his temperature, from pulling off my coat and laying it over him, from looking up at the empty bridge and realizing no one else was coming. He was a stranger. A dangerous one, maybe. But he was breathing because I had chosen not to walk away. And for one quiet second beneath that bridge, with rain falling like static around us, I thought saving him was the hardest thing I would have to do that night. I was wrong. I do not know how long I knelt beside him under that bridge, counting his breaths like they were seconds on a clock. The rain kept falling. The river kept moving. The city above us kept pretending nothing had happened. My phone screen was cracked from where it had hit the rocks, but it still worked. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the emergency number, while the man on the ground tightened his hand around my wrist with the last of his strength. Not hard, not threatening, just enough to stop me. His eyes opened halfway. "No hospital," he whispered. His voice sounded scraped raw, but the command inside it was still alive. "You need medical help," I said, because that was the truth, and because truth was easier than fear. "You are cold." You are hurt, and you can barely stay awake. His gaze drifted past me toward the bridge, toward the road, toward something only he could see. They will look there first. I went still. The rain suddenly felt colder. Who will? He did not answer. His hand fell away from my wrist, and his eyes closed again. I should have walked back up those stairs and found help. I should have trusted procedure. I should have remembered every hospital training video that warned us not to put ourselves in danger. Instead, I looked at his pale face, at the way his breathing hitched when the wind changed, at the silver ring pressed into his palm like a prayer he did not believe in, and I made the worst decision of my life with the best part of my heart. My apartment was 6 blocks from the bridge. It took almost an hour to get him there. I used the service road behind. The warehouses, the one delivery trucks took during the day, and nobody watched at night. He woke twice. Once when I slipped my shoulder under his arm and helped him stand. Once when headlights turned the corner too fast and washed over us like a searchlight. Both times, his first instinct was not pain. It was awareness. His head lifted. His eyes sharpened. He listened like a man trained to hear danger before it spoke. By the time I got him through the back entrance of my building, my arms were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. The hallway smelled like old carpet, rain boots, and Mrs. Donnelly's cabbage soup from apartment 2B, normal things. Safe things. Things that made the man beside me feel even more impossible. My place was small enough that the kitchen light reached the couch, the front door, and half my bedroom at the same time. I helped him sit on the faded blue sofa I had bought for $40 on Facebook Marketplace. He looked absurd there. Too tall, too expensive, too quiet. Like a storm had put on a dress shirt and collapsed in my living room. I grabbed towels, my first aid kit, and the emergency blanket I kept from an old camping trip. I did only what I could do safely. Warmth, pressure, clean water, steady breathing. No heroics. No pretending I was a surgeon in my own kitchen. His shirt was ruined, but the fabric around his shoulder and side told me enough. He had been through something serious before the river ever touched him. I worked carefully, keeping my eyes on my hands, talking because silence felt too heavy. My name is Hannah, I said. Hannah Reed. I am an emergency room nurse. I am not asking who you are because I have a feeling I will regret knowing. For the first time, his mouth almost moved like a smile. Almost. Ethan, he said. One word. A name, maybe. A warning, maybe. Then his eyes lowered to the ring in his palm. His fingers closed around it again. I wrapped the emergency blanket over his shoulders and stepped back, soaked, shivering, and suddenly aware that I had brought a stranger into the only safe place I had left in the world. Outside, a car rolled slowly past my building. Then another. Ethan's. Eyes opened. Not sleepy anymore. Not weak. Turn off the light, he said. And this time, I did not ask why. Darkness changed the size of my apartment. The walls seemed closer. The windows seemed thinner. Every sound from the street came through sharper than before. Tires whispering over wet pavement. Rain ticking against the fire escape. The old radiator knocking once like a warning from another room. I stood beside the kitchen counter with one hand on the light switch and the other pressed flat against my own heartbeat, trying not to breathe too loudly. Ethan sat on my couch under the silver emergency blanket, his face half hidden in shadow, his eyes fixed on the narrow gap between the curtains. He did not look like a man who needed saving anymore. He looked like a man waiting for the world to make one wrong move. Outside, another car slowed near the curb. Its headlights slid across my ceiling in pale bars, then disappeared. I swallowed. Are they looking for you? I whispered. He did not answer right away. That silence told me more than words would have. Maybe, he said finally. Maybe they are hoping I am already gone. My skin went cold beneath my wet scrubs. I had spent years in emergency rooms learning how to stay calm when alarms went off, when families cried, when doctors gave orders in voices too controlled to be comforting. But nothing in my training had prepared me for a stranger on my sofa speaking like his life was a business decision someone else had made. Who are you? I asked. His gaze shifted to me, slow and unreadable. For a moment, the rain filled the room between us. Someone you should not have found. That should have been enough to make me step back. Instead, it made me angry. Not loud angry. The quiet kind. The kind that keeps you standing when fear wants you small. I found a man drowning under a bridge, I said. Not a secret. Not a problem. A man. So until you can walk out of here without falling over, You are going to sit there, stay warm, and stop talking like I made a mistake by keeping you alive." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. It vanished almost as quickly as it came. "You talk to everyone. Like that. Only men bleeding on my furniture." His mouth curved faintly, but his eyes stayed tired. For the next few hours, neither of us slept much. I changed the towel near his shoulder when it grew too damp. I made coffee I was too shaken to drink. He refused pain medicine twice, accepted water once, and kept the silver ring wrapped inside his fist. Every so often, his eyes closed, but his body never fully relaxed. Around 4:30, the rain softened. Around 5, the sky outside the curtains turned from black to charcoal. Around 6, I heard engines. Not one, not two, many. Low, expensive engines rolling into my street with a discipline that made my stomach drop. Ethan opened his eyes before I moved. He listened for 3 seconds, then pushed the blanket aside and stood, slower than he wanted me to notice. "Stay behind me," he said. "Absolutely not," I whispered, but my voice did not sound convincing, even to me. The first knock came before sunrise finished touching the windows. Not frantic, not polite. 3 measured knocks that made every apartment in the building seem to hold its breath. Ethan walked to the door. I followed because fear had never been good at making me obedient. When he opened it, the hallway was full of men in dark suits. More stood behind them on the stairs. Through the front window, I could see black vehicles lined along the curb, their polished roofs wet with morning rain. The man closest to the door looked at Ethan, and relief broke across his face so quickly it almost looked like pain. Then he lowered his head. So did the others. One by one, 20 men, maybe more, bowing in the hallway of my cheap apartment building like my living room had become a throne room. The man in front spoke first, his voice rough with emotion and fear. "Boss." My hand tightened around the back of a kitchen chair. The room tilted slightly. Ethan did not look at them. He looked back at me, at my wet hair, my old scrubs, my bare feet on the kitchen floor, and the $40 couch where I had kept him breathing through the night. Then he said the words that made my ordinary life end before breakfast. "No one enters unless Hannah says they can." 4. 3 seconds, no one moved. Not the men in the hallway. Not Ethan. Not me. Even the radiator went quiet, as if my apartment had finally understood that something larger than fear had stepped inside. The man at the front lifted his eyes toward me, then lowered them again with careful respect, the kind people use around hospital administrators, judges, or families waiting for terrible news. "Miss Reed," he said, though I had never told him my name. My stomach tightened. Ethan turned his head slightly, and the man stopped speaking as if a hand had closed around his voice. "Do not frighten her, Caleb." Caleb nodded once. He was older than the others, maybe 50, with silver at his temples and a black overcoat that shed rain onto my welcome mat. He looked like someone who had spent his whole life standing near danger and calling it work. Behind him, the hallway was packed with dark suits, quiet faces, and eyes that kept scanning corners, windows, exits. My neighbors did not open their doors. In that building, people complained if your music was too loud after 10, but that morning every apartment stayed silent. Ethan stepped back from the doorway, one hand briefly touching the wall for balance. I saw it. So did Caleb. Neither of us said anything. Pride has a sound, and Ethan Blackwell wore his like armor. "You should sit down," I said. His eyes met mine. The hallway seemed tense. No one gave orders to him. I understood that immediately. I also understood that I was tired, cold, and no longer impressed by men who thought silence made them immortal. "That was not a suggestion," I added. Something moved through the men outside, not a laugh, not exactly, more like shock trying to stay disciplined. Ethan looked at me for a long moment. Then, to my complete disbelief, he sat down on my $40 couch. Caleb stared at me like I had just moved the sun 2 inches to the left. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steadier than my hands. Caleb looked to Ethan for permission. Ethan leaned back, pale beneath the shadow of the emergency blanket, the silver ring resting against his knuckles. "Ethan Blackwell," he said. The name landed in my kitchen like a dropped glass. I knew it. Everyone in the city knew it, even people who pretended they did not. Blackwell Shipping, Blackwell Holdings, Blackwell Foundation, buildings with his family name carved above marble doors. rumors underneath them like roots under concrete. Men who vanished from public life after crossing the wrong people. Donations large enough to make politicians smile too carefully. A dynasty everyone discussed in lowered voices, as if volume could be dangerous. I took one step back without meaning to. Ethan saw it. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes tightened. "You should have told me," I said. "You would have left me under the bridge." "No," I said, and hated that it was true. "I would have called somebody with better judgment than me." Caleb cleared his throat. "Sir, we need to move. The house is secure. The doctor is waiting." Ethan did not look away from me. "Find out who came down this street before dawn. Every car, every camera, every face. Already in progress. And her building? 2 men at the front, 2 at the back, 1 across the street." My head snapped toward Caleb. "Excuse me." Ethan stood again, slower this time, and the room grew smaller with him upright. "From this morning on, you are under my protection." The words were calm, almost gentle. That made them worse. I folded my arms, suddenly aware of my wet scrubs, bare feet, and the ridiculous fact that a feared man was trying to rearrange my life before I had even brushed my teeth. "I did not ask for protection. You pulled me out of the river. That was medical ethics, not a contract." His eyes held mine, steady and unreadable. "The people who wanted me gone will want to know who helped me survive." The room went cold in a way the rain could not explain. Outside, one of the black cars idled by the curb, its engine humming like a secret. Ethan reached for his coat, but Caleb moved first, offering a dry black one from the hallway. Ethan ignored it. Instead, he looked at the old gray coat I had thrown over him beneath the bridge, now hanging damp over a chair. "I owe you my life, Hannah Reed," he said. "And men like me are not allowed to leave debts unpaid." I should have been quiet. Any reasonable woman standing barefoot in front of 20 men in dark suits would have nodded, accepted the offer, and thanked the dangerous stranger for deciding her life mattered. But reason had left me somewhere between the riverbank and the moment my name came out of Caleb's mouth like it belonged in a file. "No," I said. The word was small, but it cut through my kitchen with enough force to make every man in the hallway look up. Ethan Blackwell went still. Not angry, not surprised exactly. More like the whole room had shifted into a language he was not used to hearing. "No," he repeated. "No." I said again, stronger this time. "You do not get to stand in my apartment, put men around my building, talk about cameras and cars and faces, and call it protection like that makes it polite." Caleb's eyes moved toward Ethan, waiting for the kind of reaction men like him expected from men like Ethan. I expected it too. A raised voice. A threat. Some cold reminder that I was out of my depth. Instead, Ethan only watched me, his gray eyes quiet and unreadable beneath the weak morning light. That made me even angrier. "I pulled you from a river because you were alive and needed help," I continued. "I did not pull you out so you could buy my street, assign guards to my door, and decide what happens to me before breakfast." "This is not about ownership," Ethan said. His voice was low, controlled. "This is about risk." "Then let me decide what risk I accept." "You do not understand the kind of people involved. And you do not understand mine," I snapped. The words came faster now, fed by fear, exhaustion, and 14 hours of hospital fluorescent lights still buzzing inside my skull. "I have rent due Friday. I have a car that starts when it feels generous. I have patients who call me nurse even when they forget my name 5 minutes later. I have a life, Ethan. It is not glamorous, and it is not quiet, but it is mine." Something flickered in his face when I said his name. Not weakness. Recognition. Like I had taken the crown off a statue and reminded everyone there was a man underneath. Caleb shifted near the doorway. "Miss Reed, with respect, Mr. Blackwell is trying to keep you safe." I turned on him. "With respect, Mr. Blackwell can start by asking." Silence fell so hard I heard rainwater dripping from someone's coat onto the hallway floor. One drop, then another. Ethan looked at Caleb. "Everyone out." Caleb hesitated for less than a second, but I saw it. He did not like leaving his boss alone in my kitchen. Ethan did not repeat himself. The hallway emptied in a quiet wave of footsteps and expensive fabric until the door clicked shut, and suddenly my apartment felt too small for the two of us, and everything unsaid between us. Ethan stood near the couch, one hand braced against the back of it, his face pale, but his spine straight with stubborn pride. "Ask then," he said, I blinked. What? You said I should ask. His gaze held mine. Hannah Reed, will you allow my people to watch the building until I know who followed me last night? It was ridiculous how formal he sounded in my tiny kitchen, wearing damp clothes under an emergency blanket, asking permission as if the answer mattered. Worse, I believed him. The building, I said slowly. Not my apartment. Not my phone. Not my job. Not my friends. Agreed. No one follows me inside the hospital. They stay outside. No gifts. No money. No paying my bills. His mouth tightened faintly. That last one seems inefficient. That last one is non-negotiable. For the first time, I saw it. Not a smile. Something closer to surrender, learning how to breathe. Agreed, he said. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt the floor tilt again, because a man the city whispered about had just let a tired nurse set the terms in front of his entire world. Then Ethan reached for my old gray coat, folded it carefully over his arm, and walked toward the door. Before he opened it, he paused. For what it is worth, he said without looking back, you are the first person in 10 years who has told me no and meant it. My throat tightened, though I did not know why. Then you have been surrounded by the wrong people. He turned then, and the look in his eyes was not cold anymore. It was almost human. I am beginning to think you are right. After Ethan left, my apartment did not feel empty. It felt washed by the shape of him. The couch still held the dent of his weight. The towel on the floor was damp from river water. My kitchen smelled like cold coffee, rain, and the strange expensive cologne that had somehow survived the storm. Outside, his men had become part of the street before the sun was fully up. One stood near the bus stop pretending to check his phone. Another leaned beside a black sedan across from the laundromat. A third sat in a parked car with the engine off and his eyes on my building. They were not obvious unless you knew to look. I knew to look. That was the first thing Ethan Blackwell had changed about me. I locked the door, then locked it again, because doing the same useless thing twice sometimes feels like control. I peeled off my wet scrubs, took the fastest shower of my life, and put on jeans, a sweatshirt, and the thick socks my sister mailed me every Christmas because she thought practical gifts counted as affection. I was supposed to sleep. I had been awake for almost 24 hours. My body begged for the bed. My mind refused to close its eyes. Every time I tried, I saw the river. His hand, those gray eyes opening under the bridge like the night, had given me a warning, and I had mistaken it for a person. I started cleaning instead. Nurses clean when we do not know what else to do. We wipe counters, fold blankets, throw away stained gauze, make order out of panic with paper towels and stubbornness. That was when I found his jacket. Not the coat he had taken from my chair, but the suit jacket he must have been wearing before the river claimed the rest of him. It was draped over the back of my bathroom door, dark, heavy, ruined beyond anything a dry cleaner could forgive. I almost threw it into a garbage bag without touching it. Then I felt the weight. Not fabric weight. Something small and hard beneath the lining near the inside seam. I froze. The apartment went silent around me, though I knew the refrigerator was still humming and rain was still tapping the fire escape. I turned the jacket over carefully. The lining had been sewn shut by hand in one narrow place. Not neat, not professional, but deliberate. My breath slowed. I should have called him. I should have opened the door and told one of the men outside that their boss had left something behind. Instead, I stood in my bathroom with a pair of nail scissors in my hand, telling myself I only wanted to make sure it was not something dangerous. The thread gave way with 3 tiny snaps. Inside was a black flash drive no bigger than my thumb, wrapped in a strip of plastic and tucked into the seam like a secret with nowhere else to hide. For a full minute, I just stared at it resting in my palm. It looked ordinary. That was the terrifying part. Ordinary things ruin lives every day. A text message, a receipt, a photograph, a flash drive hidden in the jacket of a man powerful enough to fill my street with quiet guards. My laptop sat on the kitchen table, old and slow and covered with a faded sticker from a hospital charity walk. I looked at it, then at the flash drive, then at the window, where the man across the street lifted his gaze as if he felt me making the wrong decision through 3 panes of glass. I did not plug it in. Not yet. I was reckless, not stupid. I wrapped it in a clean washcloth and placed it inside the ceramic sugar jar my mother had given me before she moved to Arizona. My hands were still shaking when my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. For 2 seconds, There was only breathing. Then a man I did not know said my name softly, almost kindly. Hannah Reed. My heart stopped. You have something that belongs to Mr. Blackwell. The voice on the phone was calm enough to scare me more than shouting would have. I do not know what you are talking about, I said. But the lie came out too quickly, too thin, and the silence that followed told me he had heard it break. That is unfortunate, the man replied. Mr. Blackwell will be disappointed if you misplace it. He said Ethan's name like a blade wrapped in velvet. Not loud, not emotional, just certain. I looked at the sugar jar on the counter, then looked away as if the stranger could see through the phone, through the walls, through me. Call him yourself, I said. You clearly have his schedule. A soft breath moved across the line. Almost a laugh. He is surrounded by loyal men right now. Loyalty can make a person difficult to reach. My fingers tightened around the phone. Outside, the man by the bus stop had disappeared. The black sedan across from the laundromat was still there, but its driver was looking down at something in his lap. Not at my building. Not at me. For the first time since dawn, Ethan's protection looked less like a wall and more like a curtain someone could slip behind. Who are you? I asked. Someone who knows you work at St. Agnes Memorial. Emergency department. Night rotation. You like the north parking lot because it is closer to the staff entrance, even though the lights near the third row have been broken for 2 weeks. My mouth went dry. The apartment seemed to tilt around me. Stay away from me. Then give back what you found. I found a man in a river. No, Hannah, he said, still almost kind. You found the reason he was put there. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended, listening to nothing. Then everything happened in small, careful movements. I took the flash drive out of the sugar jar. I wrapped it in gauze from my first aid kit, tucked it inside an empty pill bottle, and taped the bottle beneath the loose bottom panel of my laundry hamper. It was not clever. It was what panic and sleep deprivation could manage. By 7:30 that evening, I convinced myself I had to go to work because rent did not pause for fear, and patients did not stop needing nurses because a powerful man had collapsed into my life. Ethan's men followed from a distance. I saw one car behind my bus for 10 blocks. Another parked across from the hospital entrance. They stayed outside, exactly as I had demanded. For the first 6 hours of my shift, I almost believed that was enough. The emergency room was its usual storm of ordinary disasters. A kid with an asthma flare, a delivery driver with chest pain, an elderly woman who kept apologizing for needing help. I moved from room to room on automatic, smiling when I had to, charting when my hands stopped shaking. At 1 a.m, my supervisor sent me to my car for the spare sweatshirt I kept in the trunk after a patient spilled orange juice down my sleeve. The north parking lot was wet and nearly empty. The broken lights over the third row flickered once, then gave up. I walked faster, keys in hand, every nerve awake. My old Honda sat under a thin sheet of rain, harmless and familiar. I had just unlocked the trunk when footsteps sounded behind me. Not running. Walking. Patient. Certain. I turned. A man stood at the edge of the light, holding an umbrella he did not seem to need. His face was ordinary in the way faces become ordinary when they are trying not to be remembered. Miss Reed, he said. My hand closed around my keys. Do not come closer. He smiled with his mouth and not his eyes. I only want what does not belong to you. The parking lot went quiet. Too quiet. Even the rain seemed to wait. I thought of the flash drive hidden in my apartment, of Ethan on my couch saying men like him did not leave debts unpaid, of my own voice telling him I could choose my risks. I had chosen. I just had not understood the cost. The man took one step forward. Headlights swept across the lot behind him. Then another pair. Then 3 more, turning the rain into white fire. The man's smile vanished. A black car stopped so close its tires hissed against the wet pavement, and Ethan Blackwell stepped out without raising his voice, without rushing, without needing to. His gray eyes found the man first. Then me. Hannah, he said, and somehow my name sounded like both a question and a promise. Ethan did not run toward me. He did not shout. He did not reach for the kind of power people expect dangerous men to use. He only stepped out of the black car and closed the door behind him with a quiet click that somehow sounded louder than thunder. The rain slid over his dark coat and gathered along the sharp line of his jaw. He looked paler than he had in my apartment that morning, like standing cost him something, but no one in that parking lot would have dared call. Him weak. 3 more cars stopped behind us. Caleb got out of the first one, followed by men who moved with controlled urgency, spreading through the edge of the lot without crowding me, without turning the hospital into a spectacle. Ethan's eyes stayed on the man with the umbrella. "You came to a hospital," he said, his voice low enough that I had to strain to hear it. "You approached a nurse in the dark." The man lifted one hand slowly, the umbrella tilting as rain touched his shoulder. "I only came to talk." Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "Then talk to me." Something changed in the stranger's face. Not fear exactly. Calculation. His eyes moved from Ethan to Caleb, then to the cars, then back to me. "She has something that does not belong to her. She has my protection. Your protection is not what it used to be." The words landed softly, but the effect was instant. Caleb's posture sharpened. The men behind him went still. Ethan did not move at all. That was the frightening part. Men who lose control make noise. Ethan Blackwell became quiet. "Who sent you?" he asked. The stranger smiled again, smaller this time. "Someone who remembers when your family made decisions together." Ethan's face did not change, but I felt the sentence hit him. I saw it in the tiny pause before he breathed. Family. The word had weight, the kind that sinks instead of echoes. I stepped closer to my car, needing something solid at my back. Ethan noticed immediately. His gaze flicked to me, and for 1 second the steel in his eyes warmed into something human. "Hannah, get behind Caleb." I should have obeyed. I almost did. Then I remembered my own voice in my kitchen, telling him I decided my risks. "No," I said, though my throat felt tight. "Not until someone tells me what is happening." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue. Ethan did not. He only nodded once, as if my answer mattered even here, even now, with rain falling over the cracked pavement and secrets standing between us. "The drive," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "You know? I know he would not be here unless you found it." The stranger's eyes sharpened at Ethan's words, confirming everything without saying anything. Ethan turned back to him. "Tell Victor this ends tonight." Victor. The name meant nothing to me then, but it changed the air around Ethan. It made Caleb look away for half a second. It made the stranger's smile disappear. He will not like that message. He was not supposed to like it. Ethan took 1 step forward. Not fast, not threatening, just final. "You came for her. That was your mistake." The stranger looked past him, toward the hospital doors, toward cameras, witnesses, light. For the first time, he seemed to remember where he was. A public place. A place built for saving people. Ethan did too. Maybe that was why his voice softened when he spoke again. "Walk away while this can still be handled with words." I stared at him, almost unable to breathe. This was not the monster people whispered about. This was a man standing in the rain, choosing restraint because I was watching. The stranger lowered his umbrella. For 1 tense second, nobody moved. Then he stepped back. Caleb's men let him go, but their eyes followed every inch of his retreat until he disappeared beyond the far row of cars. Only then did my knees remember they were tired. Ethan crossed the space between us, stopping just far enough away not to crowd me. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The question was simple, gentle. It almost broke me. "No," I said. Scared, angry, confused, but not hurt. His jaw tightened like every word had gone somewhere deep. "I am sorry." I wanted to tell him apologies did not fix anything. I wanted to tell him he had brought this to my door, my work, my life. But the rain was in his lashes, and his hand was pressed lightly against his side. And for the first time I understood that the man I pulled from the river was still drowning, just not in water anymore. "Victor is family, is he not?" I asked. Ethan looked toward the empty place where the stranger had stood. When he answered, his voice was quieter than the rain. "He is my brother." Brother was too small a word for the look on Ethan's face. It did not hold enough history. It did not hold enough betrayal. It did not explain why Caleb lowered his eyes, why the men near the cars went silent, why the rain suddenly felt less like weather and more like a curtain closing around us. "Your brother put you in that river?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. Ethan looked toward the hospital entrance, where lights spilled across the wet pavement and nurses moved behind the glass like people in another world. "My half-brother," he said. "Victor Blackwell, older by 6 years, raised to believe the family should have been his." His voice stayed even, but there was something broken under it, something he had taught himself to bury so deeply that even pain sounded disciplined coming from him. Caleb stepped closer. Sir, not here. Ethan nodded once, then looked at me. Your shift is over. My shift ends at 7. Hannah. Just my name. Not an order. A warning dressed as concern. I hated how easily I understood it. I went inside long enough to tell my supervisor I was sick, which was not exactly a lie. My hands were cold. My stomach twisted. My whole life felt like it had been moved 3 feet to the left while I was not looking. 20 minutes later, I sat in the back of Ethan's car with him beside me and Caleb in the front seat, watching St. Agnes disappear behind rain-streaked glass. No one spoke until we reached a private brownstone on a quiet street lined with old trees and expensive silence. Inside, the house smelled like cedar, leather, and coffee. Not a mansion, not a palace, something worse. A place built by people who never had to prove they belonged anywhere. Ethan led me into a study with dark shelves and no family photographs. That absence told me more than pictures would have. Caleb placed a laptop on the desk. I took the pill bottle from my coat pocket and set it down between us. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. You brought it with you. After a stranger knew where I parked, I decided my laundry hamper was not a bank vault. For half a second, the corner of his mouth moved. Then he opened the bottle, unwrapped the gauze, and held up the flash drive like it weighed more than metal and plastic should. Caleb connected it to an offline computer. Files appeared on the screen. Names, dates, accounts, security footage, thumbnails, audio, logs. I did not understand most of it, but I understood enough from the way the room changed. Caleb went pale. Ethan did not. That scared me more. He looked like a man watching a door finally open onto a room he had always known existed. Victor has been moving money through the foundation, Caleb said quietly, feeding routes to our rivals, buying loyalty from the inside. Ethan's eyes stayed on the screen. And the river? Caleb clicked a file. I turned away before anything could play, not wanting images, not wanting proof shaped like another nightmare. Ethan noticed. He reached over and closed the laptop before the sound began. The room went still. You do not need to see that, he said. It was the gentlest thing he had said all night, and somehow that made my throat ache. But you did. I asked. His hand rested on the closed laptop, fingers still around the silver ring. I lived it. The words were quiet, clean, no drama, no details. That restraint made them hit harder. I thought of him in the river, his hand fighting the current, his voice telling me no police, no hospital, no truth. Not because he was hiding from the law, because he was hiding from blood, from family, from the one person who knew exactly where his armor opened. Why keep the drive in your jacket? I asked. Insurance, he said. Against the day I stopped trusting my own house. And that day came. His eyes lifted to mine. Gray, tired, human. That day was yesterday. Outside the study windows, dawn began pressing a thin blue line into the sky. I should have felt relief. We had proof. We had names. We had something solid to hold. Instead, I felt the ground drop lower, because evidence does not end betrayal. It only gives it a face. Ethan turned to Caleb. Set the meeting. Caleb's jaw tightened. With Victor? With everyone. That could divide the families. Ethan stood slowly, the pain in his body hidden behind perfect control. They are already divided. Victor made sure of that. Then he looked at me, and for the first time since I found him, I saw fear in him. Not for himself, for what his world might do to mine. You should leave before this becomes worse. I almost laughed, but it came out soft and sad. Ethan, I pulled you out of a river, hit a flash drive in a sugar jar, and got threatened in a hospital parking lot. Worse already has my address. By noon, the brownstone had become a house made of whispers. Men came and went through side doors, speaking softly into phones, carrying folders, avoiding my eyes the way people avoid looking directly at a storm. Ethan changed into a dark suit that made him look untouchable again. But I had seen him under a bridge with rain in his hair and the river trying to take his name from him. I could not unsee the man beneath the legend. Caleb brought me coffee in a white mug so delicate I was afraid to hold it too tightly. I drank it anyway because my hands needed something to do. You do not have to be here, he said. His voice had softened since the hallway outside my apartment, though his eyes still measured every doorway. I know. Mr. Blackwell means it. He can send you somewhere safe until this is finished. I looked across the hall, where Ethan stood alone near the study window, speaking to no one, his silver ring turning slowly between his fingers. Safe is starting to sound like a place other people choose for me. Caleb did not answer. Maybe he understood. Maybe in Ethan's world, safety was always another word for a locked door. The meeting took place at an old private club downtown, the kind of building I had walked past 100 times without wondering what happened behind its carved stone entrance. Inside, everything smelled like polished wood, expensive wool, and secrets inherited from dead men. I was not supposed to enter the main room. Ethan told me that twice. Caleb told me once. I listened to both of them and then walked in anyway. 12 men sat around a long table beneath a ceiling painted with clouds. Victor Blackwell sat at the far end, and the first thing I noticed was how ordinary he looked. Handsome, yes. Polished, yes. But not monstrous. That was the worst part. He looked like someone who would hold a door open for a stranger and smile at a charity dinner. He had Ethan's height, Ethan's dark hair, but not his stillness. Victor's power moved restlessly, tapping fingers. Shifting eyes, a smile too practiced to be kind. "This is private family business," Victor said when he saw me. Ethan stood beside me. "She is the reason I am alive to discuss it." The room went quiet. Victor's smile thinned. Caleb placed the printed records on the table, then the drive, then a sealed envelope addressed to federal investigators and the district attorney. Not threats, not weapons. Paper. Proof. The most dangerous thing in that room was not a man. It was the truth. Victor laughed once, soft and polished. "You bring a nurse to witness your weakness?" Ethan did not move. But I did. I stepped forward before fear could ask permission. "No," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "He brought me because I saw him choose not to become what you wanted him to be." Victor's eyes found mine, cold and curious. "You know nothing about our world." "I know enough," I said. "I know that a man who has to betray his own blood to feel powerful was never strong to begin with." The table froze. Someone inhaled sharply. Ethan looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the river again, that impossible moment between sinking and being saved. Victor stood, anger cracking through his perfect mask. For 1 second, I thought Ethan would answer that anger with the old language of his world. I saw it pass through him. The temptation, the inheritance, the easy road carved by men before him. Then his hand lowered. He turned to Caleb. "Give them everything." Victor stared at him. "You would hand family business to the law?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "You stopped being family when you mistook loyalty for ownership." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Phones began to ring around the table. Men looked at documents, at each other, at Victor as if seeing him for the first time. His empire did not collapse with noise. It folded inward, silently, like a room losing air. Caleb opened the doors. 2 investigators entered with calm faces and official badges. No chaos. No spectacle. Just consequence walking and wearing raincoats. Victor looked at Ethan one last time, and whatever lived between them died without needing a sound. When they led him away, Ethan did not watch. He looked at me. I realized then that saving someone is not always pulling them from water. Sometimes it is standing close enough to remind them they still have a choice. After Victor was taken away, the room did not celebrate. Powerful men do not know what to do when a war ends without a victory speech. They shuffled papers, avoided Ethan's eyes, pretended the table had not just become a mirror. I stood near the door with my hands wrapped around the strap of my purse, feeling suddenly aware of my cheap shoes against the polished floor, my hospital sweatshirt under a borrowed coat, the fact that I had not slept enough to understand how my life had crossed into theirs and left fingerprints. Ethan remained at the head of the table, silent while Caleb spoke to lawyers, investigators, and men whose loyalty was being rebuilt one careful word at a time. He should have looked triumphant. He did not. He looked tired in a way power could not hide. When the room finally emptied, he turned to me. "I can have Caleb take you home." His voice was gentle, which made the distance in it hurt more. "Is that what you want?" I asked. He looked toward the tall windows where afternoon rain streaked the glass. "What I want has caused enough damage." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in the ache behind my ribs. "That sounds noble, but it is still you making the decision." His eyes came back to mine. Gray, quiet, unarmed. "Then tell me what to do." No man like him had ever asked me that before. Maybe no one had. I thought about the bridge, the river, my apartment in darkness, the flash drive hidden like a heartbeat inside a sugar jar. I thought about how he had listened when I said no, how he had chosen paper over punishment. How he had stood in a room built by dangerous men and let the truth do what force could not. Start by walking outside, I said. No guards between us. No orders. No debt. For a moment, Caleb looked as if he might object from across the hall. Ethan raised one hand without looking at him, and Caleb stopped. We walked out through the carved stone entrance into a city washed clean by rain. The black cars waited along the curb. Men in dark suits stood beside them, watching their boss with the kind of attention that made strangers cross the street. Ethan paused on the steps. Then, slowly, he turned to them. Miss Reed goes where she wants, he said. No one follows unless she asks. The words moved through his men like weather. Confusion, respect, adjustment. Then one by one, they lowered their heads to me, not because I belonged to Ethan Blackwell, but because he had made it clear that I belonged to myself. My throat tightened. I hated that I wanted to cry in front of men who probably thought tears were a tactical weakness. Ethan noticed, because of course he did. He stepped down one stair, then another, until we stood at the same level on the wet sidewalk. For once, he did not tower from a distance. He simply stood there, rain darkening his coat, the silver ring resting in his open palm. This belonged to my father, he said. I used to think it meant I had to become him. He closed his fingers around it, then opened them again. Last night, I nearly died holding on to the wrong inheritance. I did not know what to say. Maybe some moments are too honest for language. Ethan lowered himself slowly to one knee on the rain-slick sidewalk. Gasps moved through the men behind him. Caleb went completely still. I forgot how to breathe. Not ownership, Ethan said, looking up at me. Not payment. Not a claim. His voice remained steady, but his eyes did not. Gratitude. For pulling me from the river. For standing in that room. For reminding me that power without mercy is just fear wearing a better suit. The city moved around us. Taxis hissed through puddles. Someone honked 2 blocks away. Life continued, rude and ordinary and beautiful. I reached down and closed his fingers over the ring. Then stand up, Ethan. He did. Not as a king. Not as a monster. Just a man who had been given one more chance and finally understood what that meant. Months later, people still whispered his name differently. Some said he had become softer. They were wrong. Mercy did not make him weak. It made him exact. As for me, I still worked nights. I still paid my own bills. I still crossed Riverside Bridge when the shift ran late. But I never heard the river the same way again. Because once, beneath that bridge, I thought I was saving a stranger from the water. I did not know I was saving a man from becoming the darkness everyone expected him to be. He ruled the city, but that morning, he let me rule his silence.